And we should be live on Facebook. And welcome everybody to For Feck's Sake Marketing Adventures with Carmel. And of course, as normal, I have an amazing guest here today who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. For Feck's Sake Marketing Adventures, if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell so you can get more tips, tricks on marketing, what works, what doesn't, and also get to meet some amazing guests and hear their story and their tips, tricks, and insights to help you grow your business even more. If you're watching us on Facebook, here's a like and a comment, and let us know any questions that you have, and we'll make sure we get back to answer them. So for now, I would love to introduce you. This is really exciting for me to do this interview. I have known Justin for many, many, many years. 10 or 11 years, I think, actually, Justin. And Justin has, over that time, like us all, evolved and grown. And as he would say himself, from this amazing salesman, he's now gone into podcasting. And it's podcasting with a difference, but I'm going to allow him to explain it all in terms of the content. But he's up to 100 episodes now, I believe, isn't it, Justin?
Yeah, thanks, Carmel. Absolutely. As of this morning, episode 101, Time Frame for Wealth came out, just a short one, but yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah, absolutely. Who would have thought, indeed? So today we're going to talk about podcasting and about your journey into podcasting. And I know some of the questions I've been asked recently is like, well, you know, why podcasting? Why is it so popular? What is it about this podcasting that would make me interested and want to do it? Because we seem to be hearing a lot about it. So give us a little introduction into Justin as to who Justin is and who he was that brought him to where he is right now.
Look, thanks, Carmel. I can take that any number of ways. Well, look, let's start off with the reference point. When I first was introduced to this notion of podcasting, I believe there were about 750 to 850,000 podcasts in the world. And the average length of a podcast was typically about 7 to 8 episodes. And just recently I went back just for my own curiosity, and there are a little over 2 million podcasts. And the average length of a podcast is about 14 or fewer. Okay.
Right.
And so, I'll be honest, I wish I could tell you that my love affair with podcasting was like two people meeting each other for the first time, looking into their eyes, and time stopped, and all you could hear was your beating heart. But the reality was, it was more akin to an arranged marriage, because it was something that was introduced to me. Someone suggested, someone who I admire and you admire and respect as well. And I think at first, given this was about 2015, so I was just jumping into the online space. It's kind of like jumping into water. You know it's cold, but you're not ready for the shock. And so then I get introduced to marketing, copywriting, and podcasts sort of stood there. So I was a bit reluctant, and it actually took me a few years before I actually jumped into podcasting. And all these years later, it's something that I'm quite passionate about. I have a different understanding about podcasting as opposed to when I first was introduced. But the question, what is podcasting, is quite fascinating, because even now, despite the fact that there's over 2 million podcasts out there, still a lot of people don't know what a podcast is.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
They and one of the things that I always tell people is, don't assume that other people think the way you do. If someone were to ask me now, I'd probably give a more technical description. Well, it's where we do some content, and then I download it or upload it onto a media host, and from there it gets distributed by apps, and it's long-winded. So the closest analogy I give people, it's strictly speaking, it's not like radio. But if you and I jump in our car in the morning, we typically have our favorite radio shows that we like to, switch on. And so think of podcasting as radio for the internet. Radio for the internet.
Awesome. I love that way of putting it. It's quite succinct. One of the things I'm quite auditory by nature, and I've loved listening to audio books and things like that over the years. But I do know that podcasting is becoming more and more prevalent. And as you alluded to with that, it's gone up to 2 million now. And every man and his dog seems to be doing a podcast because they are easily accessible and listened to. So tell us what it is that made you decide on podcasting rather than just marketing or copywriting or whatever. And secondly, what do you think is the advantage of podcasting for business?
Look, a good question. I was having coffee a couple of weeks ago with two clients of mine. The daughter is a veterinarian up in the foothills in Armidale, and her mother is retired now, and she breeds corgis, so she's got her own kennel. And so I love having conversations. And I asked the question, look, I know you're a veterinarian, but of all the animals, what's the most popular? And she said, well, Justin, take a guess. And I said, dogs. And I said, yeah. So yeah, I said, yeah, you know. And so she said something very interesting, which I'll make sense of now. And she said, dogs are interesting, or the pets are interesting, because what she finds more fascinating are the owners of pets. And she says, you know, there are some dogs that are just the family dog. The run of the mill. They do a little protection work. They keep the kids company. They're just there. And then you get some dogs that they're kind of like prestige dogs. They're a status symbol because the owners will spend untold amounts of money on this pooch, and they get people to come around and they get work done on it.
Yeah.
And then you get other people where the dog is kind of like it's a working dog. So the relationship that working dog has with a farmer is very different. And then you've got dogs that specialize in security. So they've got a different relationship. And so I thought that's brilliant, because when you look at podcasting, some of the podcasts out there are just infotainment podcasts, the mom and dads that have and people that have come up with an idea and they just have a bit of fun. And then you've got people who look at podcasting as an enterprising, from an enterprising point of view. And then you get people that are very entrepreneurial. So they look at the same thing called podcasting, but look at it from different perspectives. And that's why you've got such a smorgasbord of podcasts out, and a mishmash and out there. So in answer to your question, people who are entrepreneurially minded, the types of podcasts that they have are vastly different. And if I had to make a summation out of all the books I've read and people I've interviewed to sort of make sense of podcasting, is that it's no different to the mantra of marketing, which is the really good podcasts, they know their audience. So they know specifically who they're marketing to. They keep a finger on the pulse. Just one of the exercises I did was I started listening. I don't listen to radio, but I listened to some of the local radio. And what I was listening for is what copywriters will always talk to you about, which is you keep your finger on the pulse so that you know your audience, because your audience is always having this conversation in your mind. And the best radio hosts and those sort of guys and gals are the ones that always seem to be able to come into that conversation you're having in your head. And that's what makes them brilliant. And so from that perspective, there's lots of podcasts out there, genres, the breadth and depth and the niches, it'll blow your mind. But in answer to entrepreneurial podcasts, they're generally very specific. They know who they're marketing to. The content is typically very specific again. And what they do is they focus on a quality of contents, because podcasting is great, but people always say to me, wow, 2 million podcasts. And I tell people, if you look at any human endeavor on the planet, bar none, be it academic or academia, be it sports, whatever, you'll always find it's the 1 to 3% that do exceptionally well. And the vast majority fall into wherever they may fall. And, but ultimately, the difference with the guys that do really well is that they're committed to their podcast. They know their audience. So the quality of the content has to be there in order to engage. And so they just do it consistently over time, whereas most people tend to overestimate what it's going to take to create a good podcast. Hence the reason why there's so many. And I always tell people it's actually easy to do well in podcasting, because so many people will just pull the plug and call it a day after a very short while.
Yeah, because it just, like anything, it takes time to change. Now, I know your channel specifically, and please mention that channel so people can go and see it. the content in your channel, and I love listening to them, they're very conversational. You're really good at interviewing and the questions and the research that you do in it, but it's quite diverse with the content, but it does come underneath a banner, if you like. So would you like to explain what that banner is and why it's so diverse?
One of the beautiful things about podcasting is that it's very forgiving, because you can start out with an idea, and as the time flies by and you start doing more episodes and you start thinking about what your original idea, it might morph into something quite different. But ultimately, my podcast is called The Money and Time Machine, and it's primarily because money and time are the two facets that most people in the modern day world tend to their lives tend to revolve around it.
Yeah.
And so my focus is primarily looking at wealth creation from a perspective of social engineering. I was just interviewing a coach from Vancouver, so I'm going to officially interview her next week, Thursday. And it's wonderful. And everyone talks about personal development as this industry, but no one wants to talk about how did the world as we know it, our capitalist society and so forth, how has it been arranged in such a way that it's constructed so that the people, invariably our results are by default. Yeah. Oh, sorry, by design, I should say. So, so ultimately, I want to have a conversation where it's not about you. You're not stupid. It's not that you don't know something. It's just that you just probably can't appreciate that everything in your life is constructed in such a way that the results are what typically most people get. And so if you look at other people who are successful, well, what are they doing so differently from yourself? And how can you sort of how can you perhaps start thinking in the way they do so that you can bring about a different outcome?
Yeah. Oh, and look, I love listening to it because it does have so many different ones, but as you say, all talking about that time and money, whether it's via business or whether it's via the psychology of it to understand business. It's very informative and such a wide range of guests. But I know, as you said, you start out with an idea and you never really know where it's going. And look, I think I personally know it's so vital to take action and see, where it goes. So from where you started to where you are now, would you say your direction has got clearer?
It has, but it's also made me realize that the conversation that I like to have, which is I'm very passionate about, but it's not a sexy conversation, just as I had to get to a stage in my life where I said, well, I had this conversation with myself. If I'm so smart, how come I'm so broke? And so, and I, as you can see, I'm an avid reader. And so it dawned on me until I started meeting with people who were successful, that they had a very different perspective on life. They saw the same things I saw, but they thought about it very, very differently. And so I had to, after 25 years of working and being good at what I did, the reality of the matter was I realized if I continued on the way I was going, I was going to probably reach my retirement age far from ever reaching my potential. And that scared me. And so I had this sort of epiphany where I had to ask myself, do you want to be right or do you want to learn? And so I've been going on this journey where I'm just wanting to learn and sharing what I'm learning with other people, because I say it's not sexy, a topic, because for most people, they don't see that there's anything wrong with their lives until they reach a crisis.
Yeah.
It could be a divorce. It could be a COVID 2020. They've lost
a death or anything at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's any number of reasons that, and it's generally that midlife crisis that we like to talk about. And so what I'm doing is taking people on a journey where it's not to suggest that there's anything wrong with your thinking, but it's a journey of how other people have achieved what they and how they think differently and why they think differently. And if you probably emulated something similar, you may be able to redirect your journey and sort of reach more of your potential than you might otherwise if you sort of stuck to your guns.
Yeah, and look, it's a great point, and I think a lot of people, and it seems like a certain age, you start going, well, hang on a minute, maybe I'm running out of time. So when you say you've started the podcast and you've gone on with that and this learning and evolving, so what are some of the, I suppose, hardest things that you've come across in trying to build that, to try and remain consistent and keep going? Like, what's some of the hardest things, and how have you got past them?
Look, I'll share a little secret with you. There's any
Because
number of
nobody's
people,
watching.
there's any number of people that will teach you how to do a podcast. I promise you, I did my first course in podcasting in 2015. I didn't actually launch my podcast until late 2019. And so
Wow.
people say, well, and in fact, a lot of presenters of podcasting will actually tell their members, their students, that little fact. It's a way of making everyone feel easy, because most of us at that particular junction, I knew nothing about podcasting, and all I knew, it involved a lot of things like laptops and microphones. And you know me, I'm the least techie person at the time. I used to think that, and so I already had my guards up. But the biggest issue that you're going to have is twofold. For me, it was the inner critic. What took me so long was I had to deal with this voice in my mind that was always scoffing at me and says, Justin, who do you think you are? A podcast? For starters, what are you going to talk about? And then secondly, who's going to listen?
Yes.
And then, your accent, so there's all of these things happening in your mind that sort of scare you. And look, for all intents and purposes, I'm a pretty confident person. And, I did an episode on self-efficacy. So as a sales professional, I just, I've been doing it for so long. But then when you try to endeavor to do something new, much to my surprise, you find that, oh my God, I'm nervous, I'm scared. But once you get over the technical side of things, which, by the way, is fairly simple, it's so straightforward, you'll actually find that you'll get the hang of the technical side of podcasting very quickly. What I discovered now, and it was probably always there, but I was a bit blindsided, is that promotion and marketing is the most challenging part of a podcast. The ABCs, the how-tos, piece of cake. You can do that in a weekend. You can do it in a weekend, I promise you. But then I'm now at the stage where I realize, well, look, and when I said earlier that podcasting is very forgiving, it is, because you can create the content. The content never disappears. It's always there. But now I'm thinking, how can I service my listeners in a more authentic, in a more effective way, in a more engaging way? And that was probably the one area that I was probably, the intention was to create a podcast, but now I've got to focus more my intention of how can I be create more value, how can I be more professional, and how can I get it more engaging. And so that's really where I'm now focusing most of my attention on.
Awesome. And look, it's like anything, really, you can go out and learn. The skills are easy enough. It's that, and I think we get that unconscious competence quite often. Now it becomes easy to us and we almost forget just how, hard it was to learn the skills for a moment, but then how somebody else just needs the insight into that. And then it's practice, 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 and then a bit more practice. So to keep yourself over that, why would somebody, and I love digging into the person behind the business, but why would somebody in this era now, in business now, why would they actually start a podcast? What would be the best reason or purpose for it?
There's a number of reasons. I've spoken to professional people, so professors at UWA, for example, and a few others where they've got tenure. And I was quite surprised at how universities around the world, and I've actually seen this on other blogs that I've read, where universities they'll sort of eye this particular gal or guy because they're good at what they do, and they've actually got a following. These people are, from an academic point of view, they've got a huge following. So what some of these professors have done, their PhDs have done, is they said, well, how can I sort of utilize this? And they created their own podcast. Now, it's obviously very specific. It's a niche, but they've got a very intimate audience. And so what happens is they don't only just go back to the university as, this person with all of these initials behind their titles, but they've also got a following. And so I thought that was a very smart way of promoting yourself. On LinkedIn, I'm seeing professional people who are, the top 1% in their particular fields have followed the same course. So and that's clout. It brings prestige. It brings a form of status to it. And then, of course, as I said, a lot of entrepreneurs that realize they've got a following. So how can they value add? So notwithstanding, I know a lot of you can either outsource it. If you're at that level, you can. Some people do. They wouldn't know which button to press on a laptop if you had held a gun to their head. So, but the reality is they realize that as a medium, it's a nice way to give value to your particular audience and your community that you're following. So yeah, so they're just making they're establishing a level of intimacy that I think podcasting does really well for you.
Because it does add to your credibility, and also to hear the person's voice directly to you. It's like when I used to love with Audible books, if the actual author was reading it, because it was like you actually get to know them. So with podcasting, literally, I have seen it go like this. It really has in popularity. And then we also have video coming from the other side, and by all intensive purposes, from all of the stats that I'm reading, video is really coming up. What are your thoughts around podcasting versus video, or incorporating video?
Oh, look, you'd incorporate it, because the thing I love about podcasting is once you've got the information, once you've got the content, you can always repurpose. This was a word I heard years ago, and I thought I'd understood it at a very rudimentary level, but all these years later, I'm going, my God, it's
yes.
very now. I can take this little bit of content and I can amplify it. I can leverage it in ways that my brain didn't comprehend a few years ago. And so, look, I love YouTube. I tell people you can get yourself an education on YouTube. I think podcasting, when it first came out, it sort of made a bit of a resurgence, and then it sort of lagged a bit. Probably in the last 5 years, it's really escalated. And so I think it's becoming increasingly popular. So look, some people prefer to watch videos, and as popular as videos are, podcasting, so it's a tool. I love the word you use in some of your interviews with people who've got all these particular skills, and they're just simple tools. But I think podcasting is increasing in popularity. Heaven forbid,
for sure,
they're manufacturing cars now that are podcast apps. You just press a button like a radio.
Oh wow.
So people can listen to podcasts in between work and whatever else they do, but it's the ease of access that is making podcasting ever more popular. And so I'm not suggesting that you use one or the other. So one of the things that I love about podcasting, when I got introduced to the online, I learned about this thing called copywriting. I thought, oh yeah, sounds easy. But all these years later, I realized what a skill. And so with time and practice, and I haven't let it go. I'm still there. I'm still grappling with it. But I gravitated towards podcasting because I can talk. I don't have to worry about grammar. I don't have to, I have a tendency to waffle a little bit. That's fine. Everyone's got a particular style of talking and saying things, your own flavor, your own mood. But and then what I'm doing is in conjunction with podcasting, because I'm studying, podcasting and copywriting. As I study my copywriting, I find it's actually making me a better podcaster. In terms of my presentation, how can I succinctly say things? How can I get to the point without, in one sentence versus 3 or 4 sentences?
Yes.
So you always, everything that comes out of your mouth is copywriting by definition. And so starting off with podcasting first, I think just helped me put one foot in front of the other. And here I am at episode 101. But I haven't let go of all the other elements that I all think by the time I can sort of knit that nicely, I'll be unstoppable.
And I love how you say repurposing, because you can actually make a video into a podcast.
Yes, something we just
actually get. Yeah, you can get the podcast, you can put it into Otter or something similar, and you can actually use it as quotes. You can also put the podcast, which I know I'm going to put some of your episodes onto my YouTube channel, by a little bit of editing and putting an image on it. And you could actually leave it as a almost a voiceover and put some really whiz bang things in it. So it's repurposing it. So if you find that you're making a podcast that you really love, you could make it pop more for people that are visual as well as auditory without having to make new content.
Yes.
It's really vital. So tell me about some of what's the biggest mistake that you've made along the way with podcasting?
Oh, where do I start?
And we've only got a certain amount of
time. Look, absolutely. Podcasting is, I said it before, it's very forgiving. So there's nothing that sort of jumps out. It's all the little things, when you get into podcasting, it's things like production, editing, and so forth. The beautiful thing about, and the reason why podcasting is so forgiving is that if as long as the content is good, people will look over things like there was a noise in the background, they could hear a dog bark, and you may have fumbled over your words when but that improves over time.
Yeah.
So there's lots of little things. I mean, even now at episode 101, I can look back and probably see half a dozen things that I could improve. So it's more a case of just getting better at the things that you're doing, sticking to a point, having some structure to your. I'm learning how to do that. I'm always finding different ways to keep because it's important for me to make my guest feel important. So I'm always finding a way, how can I make my guests feel, because most of my guests have been interviewed by other people as well. So I want to make mine a little bit more distinctive. So I'm always trying to find, how can I make them feel good about their experience with me. So no, look, it's forgiving because there'll be lots of little things that you might find that you could have done better, but you get the opportunity to do it in your next episode and the one after that and so forth.
Yeah. And I think sometimes those little things actually add to the person you are. I know I do. I mean, video is even more unforgiving because they can see you doing it and they can see your eyes going, what just happened? So if somebody was thinking about incorporating podcasting in their business, so that's kind of what we said. What is podcasting and why should I have one, or why should I make one? And I see a few people that I know that are doing podcasts, and they're more on the feminine side of stuff, and it's more of the fluffy stuff. I say that respectfully, and they are bringing out podcast after podcast after podcast, and it really, there's an intimacy in a podcast as if they're just talking to you on the phone almost, in some of those. But I know, as you've alluded to, it does take a bit of work. It takes a bit of practice, and it takes a bit of editing in the background. So why would somebody actually make one? Like, what would be going on for them? And I know you can't tell exactly, but why would they make that? What would it add to their business, in your opinion, to make one?
I'll tell you why you would definitely want to do a podcast. One of the greatest misperceptions about, and I'm still fresh at this, even though it's been a few years, is we have this misperception about what the internet is. Podcasting is not a one to multi sort of conversation. I used to think that. It's me, and I put it out there, and I talk to people in Lesotho, Switzerland, in Germany. And then what I realized talking to people, and especially the ones that are really good, they said, no, when you have a conversation, I'm only having a conversation with Carmel Murphy.
Wow, I love that.
I'm only having a conversation. It's a conversation between Justin Paul and Carmel Murphy. When you know your audience, and it always goes back, know who you're talking to, then what'll happen is, it'll go out there into the ether and a whole bunch of people. But because you knew your audience, it'll be as if you are talking to them.
Yes.
So don't get too caught out with, oh my God, I only got 100 downloads, and what's this, and someone's getting 1 million. No, that's the worst thing you do. Have a conversation as if you're having a conversation with your best friend. The only two people in the room, or over Skype or Zoom, wherever you are, is just you and your guest. And honestly, what people feel when they're listening to it is they feel that intimacy, they feel that authenticity, but more importantly, they almost feel as though you're talking to them.
Yeah, and that's what I said. Some of them, it's like they're talking to me on the phone, and I loved that. So what do you do to get yourself into that frame of that? We are sitting down here, look at the two of us now, we're looking at a computer. At the end of the day, I'm sitting in my own house. How do you get yourself, some people psych themselves up. When I used to be speaking more in person, I had a certain kind of way I would be before I would get up on stage. So how do you get yourself into that frame of mind to really get that intimacy happening in that moment when you're doing the podcast?
Look, there's any number of ways, and I've read so many books and listened to and downloaded so many PDFs on, the ideal interview, what to say, and look, it's all wonderful. It's all wonderful, but all I can share with you is what I do. Now,
Yeah,
I typically always get very nervous before an interview. I don't know
yeah,
why, I just do. I will be doing the dishes or mopping a floor because whatever, I just need to dispense. And it's generally just nervous energy, because I'm quite excited
absolutely.
about getting
Yeah,
to it. But one of the things that I've done, and I do it and there's only twice I've done it now, and you were one of them. I typically will orchestrate a series of questions that I actually present to the person I'm going to interview in advance. Because what I don't want my podcast to sound like is a Q&A. I
yeah,
ask you a question, you answer me. Great, whoopie do. And it might seem, well, it doesn't seem as authentic. I said no, because what I'm conscious of the fact that I've only got a certain amount of time to have a conversation with you.
yeah,
I know that I love to talk and that I need to, pull on the reins so that I can and so I orchestrate the questions in advance and I present it to my guest. Now, it does two things. It makes my guest feel really comfortable because they're not coming
yeah,
on to an interview and go, good Lord, what's this guy going to ask me? You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
even the most confident people can be thrown with questions. It allows me to think about the question so that I actually build a structure. So I want to make the person I'm speaking to be human. I want my listeners to know who Carmel Murphy is in this particular case. I want to know a little bit about what you do. I want my listener to know that listening to this conversation means there's something tangible they can take away from it.
yeah,
I also want to create a nice little story. I'm trying to fit a
yeah,
lot of things in there. And so by the time my guest comes on board, it's not that it's not authentic, but they bring all their experiences to these questions and they feel so much more relaxed. And I allow them to take from, I don't know who they are, I don't know what their experiences are, but they will have it all there, the vault, and they will take out the best stories. And so what happens is my podcasts are more conversational in style
yeah.
because there's certainty. I've built in certainty. People are a lot more relaxed, and that's the aim anyway. And I'll continue to do that process and refine it until it just
Yeah.
gets better and better over time.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And look, quite often coming on to this show, if somebody wants the questions, I will give them an approximate questions. But I do like it to flow in a certain way. So if they need certainty, I give it to them. So I get that. And it's when you say that you get that nervous energy, I still do it, even though I'm sitting in front of my computer, my hands get cold. All the
Yep.
blood leaves my hands. And I was out doing dishes just before this.
Yes.
But I will always have that. And I think that just goes to show the importance of what you're doing is that it actually is having a reaction in your body. It's not just, oh, yeah, I'm going to talk to this person.
It matters to you.
And
It matters to you, and
yes, yeah,
that's important. And one of the things that I tell people, you asked me one time to critique one of your interviews, and I loved it because if you really think about it, there's no one right way of doing anything. I love the fact that you don't preempt the questions, but there's a skill that you have, and you might not even be aware of it, is that you're a very good listener. One of the things I've listened to you is because what makes for a very good conversation or interview is you ask people the question, and then based on what people come back to you with, you say, another question came up. And so that
yeah,
just feels there's an alignment. There's an alignment. I think it
yeah,
feels natural. So I'm not suggesting that everyone has to preempt their questions, but just one of the skills that some of the best people in the business do is they have an ear for
yeah,
what the person is saying, because keeping in mind this person is probably in a flow state. The person
yeah.
you're interviewing is in a flow state because you're talking about them, and who doesn't like
Absolutely.
talking
Yeah.
about themselves?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely it is. And sometimes, as you say, we can talk about what's people's favorite topic is themselves. They can talk about it for ages, but it depends on the interviewer to navigate them and knowing their audience. So, like I'm interviewing you, but I also know the audience that it's going out to is very much about people in business, people that are interested in podcasting, videos, whatever it is to grow their business. And they want insight of somebody who's already doing it.
Yeah.
And that's why I ask, it's like, it's okay to say, oh yeah, we do this. It's like, well, hang on, what are the real stuff? Yeah, I still get nervous. Yeah, I kind of preempt it. And I know one thing that you do a lot of is you do your research on the person that you're going to
Yes.
interview.
Yes.
And I think that's something that a lot of people just go, I'll just sit and talk to them. But when you have the research, you have the depth of knowledge to even listen more intently to their
Yeah.
answers and guide it to get the most out of those people.
And the guest feel that the guest actually feels like you respect them. Oh my God, the effort you've gone to try and understand me, that's wonderful. And yeah, so that's critical. So look, I don't think anything I'm sharing with people is anything new. I didn't discover it. It's just,
You'd be surprised. So a bit like you've just said to me, I think there's an element in your interview technique that you don't, you do quite unconsciously. And there is a depth to how you interview somebody rather than, hey, well, what did you do? You really take that time that you have such an in-depth knowledge of what they do, you can ask some quality questions. And when you said respect, I kind of honored was the word that came for me. They feel honored that you've gone and done and actually, this, and look, at the end of the day, everyone is looking for status in some way, shape or form to feel important on some level. So I think you do that in your interviews. You make people feel important enough for you to have gone and done your research about them.
And there's also a bit of forethought. So one of the biggest challenges people have with podcasting is content, because content is the it's everything.
It's king.
Everything.
Content is king.
If you don't have content, you have your content, you've got nothing. And so one of the things that I'm very clear with, I could have interviewed double the number of people, but because my podcast is very specific, I'm very specific about who I choose.
Yeah.
And albeit that I've done a little over 100 podcasts, and it's interesting because you mentioned, well, Justin, there's a diverse bit of content. There's diverse content, and so it seems like, but I'm actually not. I'm actually like a kelpie. I'm trying to herd sheep, because on the one hand, the content that I'm doing is not one-dimensional.
Yes.
On the one hand, I need to talk about the psychology of wealth creation relative to your personal psychology, and then on the other spectrum, people want the meat and potatoes. Okay, how do you make money? Do you trade? Is it Bitcoin? Is it real estate?
Yeah.
And so I've got this amalgamation of me, and it comes down to me because it's my responsibility. It's my baby. So how can I now match those? Because most people have a tendency to, I just want the how-to. Just tell me how to make money, without realizing that the how-to is 10% of the end result. The other 90% is the stuff that is not sexy.
Yes, all that psychology stuff that you have to work at and change. I get it.
And what I'm telling people is, no, you don't have to sit, lie on a bench with a Jungian psychologist or analyst to try and figure what happened when you're a 3-year-old. All I'm talking about in my podcast is about the notion of social engineering, looking at life through a series of filters, and each of those filters I could probably turn into a topic, a podcast topic on its own. And then I'm trying to mesh it, but it's really for people who are interested in having that conversation, because what I'm not going to do is hold people's hands. I'm not trying to save anyone. I'm trying to have people where, Justin, I've had similar questions to you, and the reason I focus on my target audience is that sort of 45 to 55-year-old age group is because most of them have the fantasy's been shattered, like me. For me, it was like in 2011 when I got divorced and I had to deal with the probability of losing my house. And then I was in my late 30s and having to go to my parents for help. I mean, who would have thought I'd be at this stage in my life? And it was a culmination of a lot of things that made me realize, look, I can't carry on this way, because one, I'm running out of time. And so having this conversation, while it seems a bit convoluted, there's actually there's method to my madness. And so on the one hand, I'm having a conversation with people because I want them to ask themselves, so that when they come to me, there's an understanding that, look, I think we've been through similar scenarios and similar understanding. And then I can take people onto that how-to journey. But if all we do is focus on that, then I just feel the depth of what I'm trying to do just won't be met. So in that respect, I'm kind of stubborn.
Mm.
you know,
Well,
because
I have to agree with you because having been a bit like yourself probably over the years of learning a lot of how to, and I'm very teachable. If I've got one humongous skill is I'm very teachable. You can point me in that direction and go press that button, do that, and I'm very teachable. But I was learning the how to so much and I knew how to do it, but I didn't know where to put the how to in order to get people to react to me so that I could make money out of the business.
yes,
So it was just, I was doing the do. I didn't have the ability, which comes down to that psychology of being able to stand outside and look down and going, okay, you have all that skill. Now, where do we need to point it to make it a lucrative
yeah,
business, basically?
absolutely. In essence, all I want people to do is start thinking for themselves, because my life changed when I started to think for myself. Prior to that, I would have debated you till the cows come home that I actually do think. But then I looked at my results and I thought, well, actually, no, what I'm experiencing here is the result of conditioning. And it's not good, bad, right or wrong. And then once I started to look at things differently and I started to reclaim my power, one of the things I do now is trading.
Mm.
You
Who
know,
knew?
who knew? And I love trading. And then I look at people who are making obscene amounts of money through copywriting and marketing. And so, you know what? I don't care what my beliefs and thoughts were about marketing. I want what they've got. So
Yeah.
now I'm going through that journey. So that's what I mean. Do I want to be right or do I want to learn? And then learning is one thing, but application is another thing. And it's something I'm very guilty of. I used to be that guy that could tell you I read these books and I went to this seminar, and then I look at my bank statement and go, that's not good. You know, so somewhere
Yeah.
there was a disconnect. And when I realized that I was so full of myself, that's when I said, no, I'm going to
Yeah.
take my journey. I'm going to put it out there because there must be other people like me who are asking the same
Yeah.
question. And so that's what I'm aiming to do.
And I think that's very key as well, is that we do spend a lot of money on this thing called personal development, but we become personal development junkies. And then we have what I call the shelf development. So we go, oh yeah, I'll take that PDF. Oh yeah, I'll take that video series. Oh yeah, I'll take that course. I'll get back to it one day. And we don't. And I'm guilty of it too. Absolutely 1,000,000%. Like, as you know, I make videos. I have about 10 or 12 other video apps that I haven't even learned how to use because I found one that was freaking awesome and does everything I needed to do. But have I paid for those other things? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I still do it? I'm very now disconcerting about what I do and what I don't do. And it's easier to say no when you start to realize what is important.
Yes.
It's much easier to do it. And one of the biggest things that you highlighted there is comparing yourself to other people.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if somebody else has 10,000 views on their podcast, but if nobody wants to buy what they have got, if that's their purpose, well, it doesn't matter. So it's been very, for me, it's look at your results very honestly, which can be hard sometimes. And are they getting you closer to the outcome you want? Not what somebody else wants. Are they getting you closer to the outcome you want, whether that's money, time, freedom, whatever it is for you? If the answer is yes, keep doing it. If the answer is no, well, what has to change? Because otherwise you'll end up back here in 12 months.
And look, the same applies to my podcast. I just recently received an email from iTunes. So I'm ranked 192 on Apple iTunes in Australia in
Well done.
entrepreneurship. And in France, I'm ranked 112. So I didn't see that coming. So that's actually given me a reference now. So at be it that 100 is a nice milestone, one of the things I'm now considering is that maybe the people I should be talking to are other entrepreneurs, because I'm trying to help people like me. And so if I get to that stage where I realize, look, people are coming on this journey, but like me, and this is not a judgment call, there was a time in my life when I said, I want change, I want better health, I want more money. But then if you were someone else looking back at me, you would notice, well, Justin, you're not actually doing anything to change your system. You're just moaning. And so now I need to consider the fact that there's a possibility, because I talk, some of my listeners email me, we had great conversations and they love it. And so I may then have to consider that, listen, I need to maybe redirect where this podcast is going, or alternatively make another one and focus primarily on the people who are already thinking the way I want other people to think. Because I'm not long for this world. There's only a certain amount of time I've got there, and I don't want to be spending that time dragging people. But at the same time, I feel the world is changing since 2008. Really, where I think my journey sort of began to where we are with COVID 2020. There's lots of things. I don't want to sound conspiratorial here, but I think people are in for a shock, and now is as good a time to do something about your financial well-being and improving it. And podcasting, whether it's for business or personal or just the corporate or standard business as we know it, is a really, really good fit for you to connect to your audience.
And I love that you said that, because I think now there has never been a better time, because people that weren't into technology have been forced into it in the last 12 to 18 months. So it's worldwide reach now rather than just your little local whatever. So absolutely. So I have two more questions for you, and then we'll finish up. I think you and I could talk forever. So number one is, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing instead?
As an alternative to you mean to podcasting or?
Well, yes, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, or heading in the direction you're heading now, what would you be doing instead?
I would probably be I dive into copywriting as the other skill, because I really loved copywriting and I thought it was really, really good. But I also know my own cognitive preferences for how I interpret information and how I make decisions on that. And so, one of the things, and you've said this so many times, if there's something that you want to learn and you're enthusiastic about it, albeit that it might be challenging, you're going to do whatever it takes to learn it. There's no excuse. You're going to do whatever it takes. And so I opted for podcasting because it was the easier route from A to B. But I also appreciated the skill there. So if I wasn't doing podcasting, I'd most definitely be rolling up my sleeves a lot more and focusing more time and energy on copywriting, because as a skill, it allows you the potential and the possibilities of creating a lifestyle where you can create as much money as you want. But it is a skill, and I'm not saying that and you've got to have some sort of drive, and you've got to want to have something. No one can drag you to it. But if it wasn't podcasting, I think I'd be trying to be a copywriter.
Yeah, and from my experience, you actually do have some good copywriting skills, because I've seen even some of your headlines and the way you've given feedback and shifted some ways of saying things. So there is that creative tendency there for copywriting. So it's there. And the last question is, if people do want to contact you, or they want to get on and listen to your podcast, can you please let us know the best places they can do that?
Look, they can find me on Facebook. I'm in the process of actually creating a page for the Money and Time Machine. Alternatively, they can email me at jp@moneyandtimemachine.com. Nice and easy. And as I said, podcasting is very forgiving, because I'm only now getting to that tail end where I can sort of sit back and say, look, I've created a result, a series of podcasts, whatever. So what are the areas that I've been pretty sloppy at? And marketing and promotion, I wouldn't say I get an F, but it certainly needs a lot of work. And so I'm really going to sort of focus now on connecting more with my audience. I am going to be delving into videos as well, because I think that's pretty odd, because podcasting gave me the confidence to now want to consider, because on a podcast I can hide behind a screen. You'll hear my voice. And so I had to become comfortable with the idea of presenting who I am in the form of videos. So, there's, so that's really, so jp@moneyandtimemachine.com. That'll be the easiest one. And we can converse and take the conversation wherever it may go.
And I lied, because I have one more question. If somebody listening to this, whenever that may be, was considering podcasting, what would you say to them?
Look, do it. Don't stop thinking. Stop thinking. If you want to do it, it's a wonderful idea, because the fact that there's over 2 million podcasts should tell you two things. It's immensely popular. That's always good. And secondly, there are people who have an insatiable appetite. I was reading something that made me feel really good. There are people that have podcasts out there, or and ideas and beliefs, that they have their detractors, and they're good beliefs, but there are still people that are detractors. And then there are people who have some of the most I don't know what planet they come from, but they've got supporters. They've got they're ardent supporters. So
Yeah.
get over yourself, get out of your own way. I will tell you now categorically. Someone asked me that the most commonly asked question I get is, "How do you make money?" You know, that's it's almost like the go-to question. And I always tell people, and I mentioned earlier, there's always that 1 to 3%, and it's typically people who have a huge following. They're movie stars, they're actors, they're sports people. So they create a podcast, which more often than not they don't even do, and so they can transfer their great following, and that's wonderful. But that is such a small percentage. The best and the most successful podcasts are from the most ordinary people, and if they walked into you or bumped into you anywhere,
You'd never
you
even
would
know.
never know that they are in the upper echelon of the podcasting world. So yeah, if you want to do it, just do it. Everything else you will figure out over time. And like me, I'm still figuring out, but I'm having fun figuring things out, and making mistakes, tweaking them, refining them, redoing them, and just hoping to get better. That's all I could ever hope for.
Awesome. Justin, it's been a pleasure to have you. And again, guys, the timeandmoneymachine.com is where you need to go to get in touch with Justin, or email
Or
him.
any good apps. You'll find me on Stitcher. You'll find me on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. So just because these are easy, most people have them on their phone. Just press it; it'll come up there.
Yeah.
And there you are. And away you go.
That's actually how I listen to it on Spotify when I'm walking in the morning.
Yes.
And quite often that's how I listen.
I love feedback. Please don't be shy. I'm big enough and ugly enough and big broad enough shoulders. So please always wanting to find ways that I can do things better.
Awesome. Justin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And any questions you have, whether it be on YouTube, remember to subscribe and click that bell, or it's on Facebook, put them in the comments below and we'll make sure that we answer them. If I can't, I'll make sure Justin does for you. So for now, it's bye from me.
Take care.